this year's World Economic Forum, which brings annually together the global political and business elites in Davos to discuss the economic development issues from the perspective of the rich, has taken place from January 22nd to 25th around the theme Reshaping the World in the midst of Syrian crisis and the chaotic so-called peace talks in Geneva. Iran's reapproachment with the West and settlement around its nuclear program with major global powers was one of the preeminent topics in the forum. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani attended the forum to address global oil executives to win back investments from oil companies as the sanctions has limitedly eased in return for temporary constraints on its uranium enrichment. Iran was excluded from Geneva II conference. Nevertheless, its President Rouhani had enough opportunity to make his voice heard on Syria in Davos. Answering the questions on Syria, he said ending terrorism that is backed by some of Syria's neighbors was a precondition for any settlement of the country's civil war. It is upsetting that there are terrorist groups in Syria whose members include not only the people from the region but also from different continents and who massacre people and sometimes each other. We all have to work together for the banishment of these groups. We must address the countries which back these terrorist groups and tell them that this is not in their benefit as well, and they will have their turn too, he said. Rouhani also said the final solution in Syria would be free elections. Another hot topic in the forum was the recent political and economic crisis in Turkey. The Deputy Prime Minister Ali Babacan spent some hard times to assure investors and the global business elite in Davos over the health of the economy despite the Turkish lira hitting new lows almost daily on political turmoil. Babacan said, however, the developments in the global markets were behind the lira's decline and the fluctuations in the Turkish markets were temporary. Geneva II peace conference was started in highly paralyzed tensions between sides except Kurdish delegation. Kurdish delegation declared that without independent Kurdish delegation they will not join the conference, and they did not. However, conference started, Syrian regime delegation could not came together with so-called opposition delegations till yesterday. Yesterday, regime and so-called opposition delegations came together face-to-face meeting after very long discussions under moderating of UN and Arab League Special Representative Lakhdar Brahimi. After face-to-face meeting of delegations, Brahimi has given a press conference and answered questions of press reporters, and all people have seen that actually absence of real oppositions and forces in Syria and Rojava, there is only that warning of peace conference. Yesterday, humanitarian issues were top of the agenda. In the first tentative meetings between Syrian regime and opposition forces in Geneva, the UN Lakhdar Brahimi said getting an aid convoy into the war-shattered city of Homs was discussed, with prisoner releases on the agenda for Sunday. We haven't achieved much, but we are continuing, he told honestly to the press members in Geneva. The situation is extremely complex, very difficult, and we are moving in half steps, he said, adding that by trying to make progress on humanitarian issues, he was aiming to create an atmosphere that would eventually enable advances on the 2012 Geneva I communique, which set out a blueprint for peace talks. Actually, delegates in Geneva are aiming at small concessions, not a real peace deal or real solutions of war in Syria. At the first day of conference, PYD co-chair Saleh Müslim pointed out that without real oppositions and forces, there will be no solutions when he held a press conference in Geneva. Kurdish and Syriac representatives who have not been invited to participate in Geneva II held press conference. They noted that the conference does not represent the people, and they said the solution lies in the self-management in Rojava, which gathering all region components in joint management. Where held a joint press conference in the city of Switzerland, both Elham Ahmed, a member of the Supreme Kurdish Commission, Saleh Müslim, co-president the Democratic Union Party, Musa Nishak, chairman Syriac Union, Hannibal Yaqub, a member of the Syriac Union Party, and Pater Browns, who have not been invited as an independent body for the Geneva II conference. Elham Ahmed noted in a press conference that Syria is going through a historical stage. Geneva II conference called external forces linked coalition as the basis for the meeting, which does not represent the peoples of the region. From the beginning of this conference appears retreat. Ahmed congratulated the declaration of democratic self-management in Jazira County, saying the peoples of the region formed common model of life among them, a self-managed democracy. Saleh Müslim, co-president of the Democratic Union Party, said that representatives of the Kurds who participated in Geneva II conference do not represent Kurdish people. The true representatives of the people have not attended the conference. Muslims say that the real solution is a model of democratic self-management that was announced in Jazira County. He said in press conference that a model county in Rojava is similar to the model Switzerland, which held now Geneva Conference 2 in it. After recent 3 MIT, National Intelligence Organization, trucks blockade, search and investigate by prosecutors' orders, even that opposing by MIT personnel who were escorted trucks started new discussions over MIT law. Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that stopping, searching and investigation of the trucks as treason and claimed prosecutors cannot order a search of these trucks without his permission because of MIT law. But actually existed MIT law is being consciously misinterpreted by Erdogan and his controlled media. Existing MIT law does not state that prosecutors can never investigate MIT officials without the Prime Minister's permission. Prosecutors can push and start an investigation when they receive an information or tips. Otherwise, how can they make an assessment and decide who is a witness or who is a suspect and if there is any incriminating content or not without investigating an information or tips? And also, the Prime Minister cannot use his legal authority to refuse the prosecutor's request because in a state governed by the rule of law, prosecutors and judges cannot be prevented from performing their duties, but in reality prosecutors can reassignment by orders of Erdogan. And they call this is democracy against enemies, indicating that the prevention of a prosecutor from performing his duties is an obvious intervention in the judiciary. Said, a prosecutor launches an investigation when he receives a tip-off and does whatever needs to be done. He can order a bus or a truck to be stopped and searched to find the suspects. If there are MIT officials among the suspects and if permission of the Prime Minister is required, he asks this only to conduct the investigation process. Actually, now MIT law says that if a prosecutors want to refer suspects who are also MIT officials to court, then they can get the permission of the Prime Minister for this. The Prime Minister cannot reject the prosecutor's demand, but he can refuse their demands under existing rules. In the Kobane canton of Rojava, preparations are underway for an official declaration of a democratic autonomous government to take place this coming Monday, 27th of January. Kobane is one of 3 cantons in Rojava. The Jizire canton officially declared itself autonomous earlier this week on 21st of January. All 3 cantons will have their own local legislative council as well as a government composed of 22 ministries. According to the decision of the Legislative Assembly of Kobane, canton autonomy of the Kobane will be declared tomorrow. Last week, 61 members of the Legislative Assembly of Democratic Autonomy of Kobane met in order to evaluate autonomous government, and it was decided to declare autonomy at 27th of January. As a result of Legislative Assembly of Western Kurdistan Autonomous Administration's meeting on 6th and 7th of January, allocation of Western Kurdistan into 3 separate administrative regions, namely Jizire, Afrin and Kobane, was decided. Following to the decision of Legislative Assembly of Western Kurdistan Autonomous Administration, every canton is expected to establish its own autonomous administration. Jizire canton already declared its autonomy at 21st of January. Legislative Assembly agreed upon a social agreement, which is also regarded as the Constitution of Western Kurdistan, during its meeting at 6th and 7th of January. Canton model has been decided as management model for Western Kurdistan and established on 4 pillars: Legislative Assembly, Administration, Justice and Supreme Election Board. Legislative Assembly is established with participation of the representatives of Kurdish, Arabic, Assyrian, Chechen, Armenian peoples of Western Kurdistan. Western Kurdistan is regarded as a part of future federalist and democratic Syria by the Legislative Assembly. While Kobane prepared for declaration for autonomy on the other side, thousands immigrated to Kobane as a result of ISID mobs and armed opposition forces conflict in Manbij. According to the testimonies of the survivors, ISID killed 61 civilians. Migration of civilians from Karakozak region to Rojava due to the conflict in Karakozak continues. Local sources also state that ISID mobs continue their preparations at the outskirts of Kobane for their next attack.
The Istanbul branch of the Human Rights Association IHD has published its 2013 report on human rights violations in the Marmara region. According to the report, 36 people died during 2013 as a result of extrajudicial killings, official error, torture and in custody. 122 women were murdered, 1,224 people were victims of torture and mistreatments, and 168 people were remanded in custody in investigation relating to the Gezi Park protests. The report stated that in the Gezi Park incidents, torture came on to the streets and fundamental rights were suspended. 155 prisoners suffered torture and mistreatments. Attention was drawn to recent cases of torture of child prisoners. 12 Kurdish children detained on political charges were tortured in Sinjan prison. 4 of them were transferred to Istanbul Young Offenders prisons and 5 to Izmir Shakran prison. Social violence against children continued. 6 children suffered domestic violence, 4 sexual abuse or rape, and 2 were forced into prostitution. The report emphasized that violence against women is continuing in a systematic way under the auspices of the state and that thousands of women have either been murdered by men or forced to commit suicide. Many gays and transsexuals have also died as a result of hate crimes.
Çanakkale First Assize Court acquitted a 13-year-old defendant who was charged with writing "Government Resign" and "Death to Fascism" on the wall during Gezi resistance protests in the northwestern province of Çanakkale. Acquitted on the second hearing of the trial, the boy was charged with property damage. The minor defendant attended the hearing this afternoon as the court ordered on 10th of January. The court in return ruled on a confidential trial, evicting all spectators in the courtroom. The hearing was only attended by the family and attorneys. Advocate Sabri Kuşkonmaz requested the immediate acquittal of his client, saying that he must not make a statement and current evidence could no way convict him of any charges. Judge Dilek Özben Buluç, on the other hand, ruled the defendant to make a statement in order to determine his eligibility for criminalization. The minor defendant made the following statement. "On the day of the incident, I went to the demonstration and saw that somebody was spraying the walls. I admired that, did the same. I didn't know that it was a crime." In addition to the statement, a social worker also testified that the defendant was not eligible for criminalization. Following the statements, the family and attorneys were ordered to leave the courtroom. Advocate Kuşkonmaz informed that the charges that the minor defendant was facing had no criminal definition and they requested for acquittal. Advocate Halis Yıldırım also added that what the child was part of his freedom of expression. The court also ordered to acquit the child according to Turkish Penal Code. While Kazova workers have decided to open their own factory, they will be producing jerseys for Cuba and Basque Country soccer teams for the upcoming friendly game in Havana on 15th of February. Kazova workers don't want to leave soccer to the soccer industry. They want to create ties between resistance and soccer, Metin Yeğin told Bianet. They will also wear these jerseys on other games as well, Yeğin said. He actively took action to bring together Kazova workers and Cuba Basque Country soccer teams. Metin Yeğin expressed the gesta of Cuba and Basque countries as a sign of mutual solidarity. There are no big corporations behind Kazova workers. There's a global solidarity of workers here. Making jerseys for Cuba is also a gesture of solidarity to a country facing embargoes. This way, Kazova factory will have a worldwide showcase. With their slogan, "Affordable sweaters for the people," Kazova workers are opening their first retail store and alternative center. Kazova workers declared that they would celebrate their victory on 10th of November after 10 months-long struggle against their factory owners. Shut down 7 months ago, Kazova factory left 94 workers unemployed with no repartitions or deserved wages. Factory owners vanished over a night after filling out the most equipment in the facility. 11 factory workers have been resisting ever since by setting up their tents in front of the factory. They also attended group protests on every Saturday, marching in downtown Istanbul with other workers who demand their deserved rise and wages. However, everything changes on 1st of May. Police broke up their demonstration with tear gas and water cannons. On 28th of June, they have occupied their factory with a strength that Gezi resistance bolstered them.
El pueblo unido jamás será vencido.